Okay, or I'll tell you what page in a second. Okay. All right. So as always, I'm going to close you guys up here so I can see my screen in full. Okay, we're on page 40, residential sales contract. Okay. All right. Oh, by the way, for some of you will be happy to know that I am going to go buy myself a PC computer sometime in the next couple of days, because profit share was really nice this month. Monday was a good day, although because Monday was 21st, whoever's on the phone, 651, can you mute yourself? Thank you. So anyway, I woke up Saturday with a little notice from the bank saying, hallelujah. So anyway, profit share was good. When I get my sheet, I usually share it with the class. So I will, maybe on Thursday, if the details are out, I'll upload it and show it to you guys so you understand that it is real. And as you talk to other agents and encourage them to do a mind switch on how to do their business, I encourage them that Keller Williams is a good option. Okay. So for those that are joining us, I'm Debbie Roof. I'm assistant to Steve, working on my broker's license. And I teach boot camp and have done it for many years. Plaython, who's part of our group today, was in my class when I used to do the evening classes as well, back in the day. So it's been some years. And so we have a mixture of people. Some are full-time, some are, and I never call someone a part-time agent, because you can not have another job and not do anything and still be what I would call a part-time agent. So there's some dual career people, and many dual career people work as hard, if not harder, than those who don't have another revenue source. They have their goals set for different things. And I'm here to teach the willing. I'm here to answer questions. The best way to reach me is text and email. I live in the country in North Culpeper, and to answer my cell phone isn't always easy, but the text and the emails certainly come through. And once the leaves fall off the trees, it'll be like having high speed for me. But right now, that's the situation. But I can always call you from a landline if you have any specific questions. When you take boot camp, you're kind of grandfathered in to be able to ask me questions and help you. You also have PC coaches, and you may have mentors in your teams or whatever, but you're always welcome to reach out to me if you need to for some clarification, okay? So where we've been so far for the last 4 classes is we've gone through the buyer's agreement and all that entails. We've gone through the listing agreement, and now we're going to put the two together into a sales contract. So those that did your homework, like I said, I haven't looked at it yet, but I will. But take your own homework while we're going through this and make any corrections that you feel that you need to make, that you may have didn't understand or whatever, okay?
What's the Zoom? What time?
It's kwunitedtraining.com.
Okay.
Okay, sure. Okay, so the sales contract is offered on, so it's the day of the offer. So if you're going to meet with your clients tomorrow, then you would, make the date the 23rd, okay, as you're preparing it. So when you're looking at documents after the sales contract, you want to make sure when the document asks you for a different date, sometimes the document's going to ask you for the date of offer, and sometimes it's going to ask you for the date of ratification. They can sometimes be the same day. They're often not the same day, but they can be. But they are 2 different dates. So the date of offer and the date of ratification, and we'll get more to that later, but just know that this is why it's in parentheses. This is the date that the offer is made on, okay? Now, if you meet your clients last night and you had the 22nd on there, it's not a big deal, okay? It truly isn't. That's the day you met with your clients. They signed it. Then you send it over to the listing agent today, the 20th, tomorrow, for example, the 23rd. Because no dates bounce off the date of offer. It's the date of ratification later on. But you want to try to get this offer as accurate as the date here, as accurate as possible, okay? Then you have your buyer's names. Their full legal names, as you've been learning. Make sure you know someone by, like, people might know me as Debbie or Deb, but that's not my legal name. So make sure you ask your clients what their legal name is, what's on their passport, their driver's license, etc. How they're going to hold title. Uh-huh.
Samantha and myself actually are like having trouble getting into the.
Okay, let me send you. So I've got other people on here.
Yeah. And like I did the website.
Yeah, there's a couple people that dialed into the help desk
Okay.
one because this started late, I think.
No, I've been on since quarter of.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, weird. Oh, for whatever reason, I couldn't get onto this, and I guess the other two people couldn't either. That's weird.
Yeah, a couple people came on pretty quickly, so I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry. I'll see what I can do.
Samantha's one of them. I know that.
That's what Raekwon just said. I would say go completely out. If someone can, I'm going to send her a message and Raekwon both a message. Let's see. No, thanks for telling me. I mean, we have glitches all the time. We don't know why we have glitches. We really don't. So I'm going to forward Chris Upham's message to give the links again, just in case. It's kwunitedtraining.com. Okay, so, okay, Samantha. So I'm going to ask you guys to go completely out of your Zoom and go back in. Clear out any, and I've had this issue like on Sunday when I was trying to do Zoom with my Bible study class. It kept making me KW United, and I had to clear out like caches and stuff on my computer, bring my own Zoom so I could have my own name. Even though I could change it, I didn't want to be there under the KW United umbrella. So clear.
Oh, that was painful.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, let's see. All right, so yeah, so I don't know if it's because like you guys are going to PC and your Zoom and your it's taking you guys back to PC when you log back in.
So I just got here. Like it just let me in. Hello. It just kept saying like could not load. Like help desk was too busy or could not load or something.
Yeah, mine wouldn't load either.
Yeah. It just let me in just now. So
Okay.
I tried to be here.
I think they changed how we get into it, the link.
Yeah, something was screwy, but
Do you know, Samantha, do you know the other lady's name? She was trying to get in as well.
Alicia and then
She's still
Sherry's here.
trying.
Yeah.
Who
Alicia,
is that?
I don't know. I'm not super familiar with who she is. I couldn't tell because her background kept like doing the thing, but.
Well, Raekwon was trying, he's here with me and he's trying to get in.
Yeah, I was just texting with him. So it let me in finally.
Okay.
I can go back to the other place and see if she's still there. Is she still stuck?
I'm just seeing if I see any names. Monica's here. Theo's here. But that's the only, besides you, that's the only two names I see that were not here earlier.
Yeah, so let me.
Rhonda's here. She wasn't here earlier, so she's here.
Her name was Alicia?
Andy's here now. Andy's here now.
And
Who was the
I'm
other
here.
one? Alicia? Was
Her
it
name-
Alicia?
Alicia, yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Let's see, I'm gonna put my name in here too.
All right. Okay, guys. You get in, Raekwon?
No, not yet, but I'm here.
Well, you're right here.
I'm here, so-
Do you want me to pop back in the other one to see if she's still stuck in like director?
You can, yeah, sure. I didn't know, like I was telling them the other day, I was having trouble. It kept taking me to this site instead of the site I wanted to be on.
Well, it's funny because like I think the training desk and then pivot like both took me and Jeff to the same place. Like we both started on different websites, but it both took us to the same.
Yes, the help desk and the pivot directly to the same place.
Okay.
Yeah, that is true. And that's why this one was created to be separate from that group. So we're not crossing over our times.
Right.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, so, all right, so again, buyer and seller. Okay, so the seller who, among other things, hereby confirm and acknowledge by their initials and signatures herein that prior disclosures in this real estate transaction that KW United is the broker for the seller and KW United is the cooperating broker, okay? Now in this case, it's two separate agents, and we've been studying in the buyers and listings that you were designated agents. So in this case, the cooperating broker represents the buyer, okay? However, if you have someone who shows up who is non-represented, they do not want an agent at all, okay, then in that case, KW represents the seller, okay? So there's no cooperating brokerage per se, is you would put KW in there that represents the seller. And then we'll get to that in the miscellaneous documents, but there is a disclosure that that unrepresented party fills out and acknowledges that they are coming into a real estate deal not represented by anyone, okay? And because a listing agent, KW listing agent, is very thoughtful to protect themselves and their client, that they're not offering up any commission to go to that unrepresented person, okay? So, and if you guys missed the listing class, and you have a question about that particular paragraph, let me know and we'll talk about it. So the listing broker and cooperating brokerages are collectively referred to as broker. If the brokerage firm is acting as a dual representative for both the buyer and the seller, just what I said, then the appropriate disclosure form is attached to and made part of this contract. Now this, I want to back up for a minute because we're talking about the word contract here, and this is residential sales contract. But when it says here date of offer, it's not a contract until it's fully signed. So it's an offer up front and a contract when it's completed. So when you're talking, it's a little bit of semantics, but when you're talking to us as your brokers and help, you know, say we're working on making an offer, it helps us understand where you are in the process. When you say I have a contract, if you were saying that to me, I have a contract, that makes me think it's ratified. I always double check and look back and say, has it been ratified? Okay, so we're talking about your offer, okay? All right, in consideration of the mutual promises and covenants set forth below, and other good and valuable considerations, the receipt and sufficiency of which are acknowledged, the parties agree as follows. Now the parties to this contract are the buyer and seller. The brokers are not parties to the contract per se. They represent the parties, but we're not parties to the contract. Okay. Real property. Buyer will buy and seller will sell for the sales price. And when something's in quotes like that and then bracketed, from here on out, that's the word they're gonna use for a longer group of words, okay? Seller's entire interest in the real property with all improvements, rights, and appurtenances. So I'm gonna read that word to you guys so you understand what it is. Okay. It is an accessory or other item with the particular activity or style of living. Okay. So it's just part of the house. Okay. but they're being very legal here. Described as follows. Okay, so the tax ID, the legal description. So what I want to do right now, okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to bring up Bright because I want you guys to see where this comes from. So just give me a second. Has anyone else been able to join us?
Alicia came in too. I
Okay.
saw her pop in, so she's here.
Oh, by the way, I do want to share with everyone that Jeff did not leave me apples on my desk. I just have to share that.
I got to the wrong place, but I'm okay now. Thank
Okay.
you, everybody.
So no more sucking up.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Womp, womp.
Yeah. Okay, so normally you would have a listing. So let's just see what's, we'll look for something active in the 22046 zip code. Okay. Here. All right, we'll just bring up a listing, random. Okay. All right, so let me go back to my, now I'm going to go back and share my screen so you can see it. Okay, so when you open up a listing, you're going to have, can you guys see that? Can you guys see the listing? 200,
Yes, I can see it.
great, 200 North Maple,
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
Okay, so you bring up this listing, and then across the top here, you have little icons that have different meanings to them. One of the things you always want to look for is this one here. It looks like a little sheet of paper. And what that takes you to is the disclosures that the other side is offering, okay? So here they have the residential property disclosure there, okay? Then you would download that and that becomes part of your offer, okay? Then you always want to bring up the tax record, okay? Now, I cannot flip back and forth between the documents, but as I'm preparing an offer, I set, because I'm not on Zoom, so I sit there with the listing open, the tax record open, and my documents open, and I cut and paste. So as I work my way down, so you guys are looking at your PDF copy, hopefully, and you can see like where it says the tax ID, I would just highlight over here, making sure I get the whole amount, and then I would cut and paste it into my contract or my offer. All right. And then legal names and such. Now here, it says Edith and Winfried L. and Margaret Gore. So that doesn't really tell me what the legal names really are. So hopefully the listing agent has provided that to me, okay? So is it Edith Gore, Winfried Gore, Margaret Gore, or, you know, because the tax, the courthouses and stuff, when they record the deeds, you know, when they're really long or it's multiple names, each jurisdiction does it differently and how they put that in there. So as you go down through here, you may or may not find other information, but hopefully the listing agent has provided you with the proper name. If not, then that's one of the questions you're going to ask the listing agent when you call them. So before you make an offer, you're going to open up the listing, you're going to look at it. And we're going to go down here and look at notes here. So there's remarks. So they've only put out public remarks here, okay? And you do read those remarks because it makes a difference how you make an offer. You go down and you see what they say who ownership is. And Is there any significance, anything that helps us out here? Okay. And it just says contact his owner. And it says owner's name is Margaret Gore down here. But our tax record says it's more than one person, right? And then when we go up to another clue you can get, but oftentimes if the agent doesn't make sure their names are there, is you can look at their disclosures. So now Margaret is the only one who's signing it. So it's possible that the others have passed away, or she's bought them out and the tax record hasn't updated. So this is part of their conversation with the listing agent. You need to talk to that listing agent and say, the tax record reflects more than one owner. You only have Margaret Gore. And if they say, well, this is an estate, then you need copies of that declaratory page of the estate to know that Margaret is the only one who has the right, the only one who has to sign and who has the right to sell, okay? So your job is to help protect your client, so make sure you follow through on that. Okay, so as we go back to, right, so Raekwon's question is, if she had a husband, he passed away, she wants to sell. Yes, there has to be some documentation. So it depends on how they held title and if they had a trust and what it all says. So there's many different ways that can happen depending on how the deed is held, okay? So yeah, sometimes you have to go to the court. So for example, 2 cases recently, I have a client who passed away and he had named 5 heirs to the estate, but 1 executor. So she's the only one who has to sign the listing and the contract, okay? The title company is making all the other heirs sign affidavits to acknowledge the fact that this property is being sold. In another situation, there are 5 heirs to the property and they all 5 have to sign everything. So it depends on what the court is saying. So obviously that group, that 5 group did not want to have an executor, or the will didn't call for an executor and it was a probate. So, you know, it's different. It's what the court document says takes place and who has the signature rights, okay? Generally speaking, it's, you know, 1 or 2 people when there's an heir, but it's never a set thing, okay? All right, so again, this is your best source. I'm gonna close out of this now, but I just wanted you guys to see this is the best source to where you're gonna fill out your offer with. And I do wanna remind you that the moment you're gonna make an offer on a property, you should download and print out the listing agreement and the tax record, okay? Several reasons. Even though we can track it, Bright can track where an agent makes changes inside here when it comes to price or when it comes to commission, especially commission, okay? What can happen is you see this offer today, you print it off, and then tomorrow afternoon before your offer is presented, the agent has gone in to make this 2.5%. Okay, and here's his 3. So you show a record of when you printed it off and it's dated and stamped. So as you're making an offer, back in the olden days, we could not see when agents went in and made changes. So it was hugely significant that we printed it off the moment we were getting ready to make an offer, because that was the line drawn in the sand as to what was being offered at that time. Okay, so to protect yourself and your clients in case any of the other things change, because you're making your offer based on what you see, right? Okay, all right, so let me close out of here. And just save it, make a file on your computer in your command for your client. It can be the miscellaneous, you know, in your opportunities until you put it into until it becomes an actual contract in your opportunities. You just load the stuff in there. Okay. All right, so now, okay, so now let me go back to my screen sharing to the other one. Okay, so the tax ID, I didn't show you guys a lot, I'm sorry, but as you look down that tax ID, tax record, if you're on a PC, you can use Control and F, and it's a find function. And you can just, and a little screen pops up for search, and you can type in the word lot, and it'll take you to all the ones that have lot. You can find the lot number. Sometimes that's quicker than trying to read down through the tax record. I would like to say it's always in the exact same place, but it's not, because the way Bright does the tax records now, they have all these fields that are of choice that each entity, each county, each state can use. And the tax record and the way the listing comes out is based on what's input, okay? So as you saw in the listing, it didn't show agent-to-agent remarks, nothing. It just didn't show that it appeared at all, because that agent didn't put anything in agent-to-agent remarks. It just showed public remarks. And same with the tax record. So sometimes you'll see the lot right away, and sometimes it's buried further down. It depends on how that county organizes their own records. So as much as you can get from lot section, put it in there. It is significant that you know exactly what's being purchased, okay? Do not skip over this. It's here for a reason. A lot of lazy agents just, they may or may not even put the tax record in, they just put the address in and they move on. Wrong properties have been sold and bought before because people did not do this correctly, okay? And then the subdivision or condominium. So a subdivision, you know, could be, you know, Dominion Crest or something like that. And then of course a condominium, the plazas type thing. But it's whatever the tax record says is the subdivision name or the condominium's name. Just cut and paste it into there. Parking space. Parking spaces, this does not refer to a non-condo parking space. So parking spaces, like for an HOA that has a townhouse, you have assigned parking spots normally. They're not deeded with the home in general. You might have a parking lot where they've just given numbers to parking spaces and arbitrarily have been assigned what's closest to that unit will be assigned to that unit. It does not mean it belongs to the unit. It's not part of the deed of that unit, that townhome. But in condos often, and not all the time, but in many condos, especially like in Arlington and some of the high rises, when they're built and people buy the condominium, they're also offered a parking spot that's deeded with the condo, okay? And maybe later on today or Thursday, I'll find one that has that so you can see it. But in the legal description, it could say something like the plazas, and it might say PS for parking spot 135, and then SB storage bin 35 type thing. Okay, and those are legally deeded with the condominium. So they're part of the deed, it goes along with the deed. At the same token, when it was built, they may have said, okay, everyone gets automatically one parking spot deeded with their condo, but then we're gonna have another spot available that you can purchase separately, and it's a separate deed, okay? So oftentimes, now back in the early 2000s, we would have, when the prices were really rising up, people used to call us and say, hey, you know, buyer would call one of our agents, you know, there's a lot for sale in Arlington, you know, for like $80,000. It's like, it's a parking spot,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so.
Hey, Deb.
Yes.
Prior to 2000, what was the common way to allocate parking spaces? So like, let's say you bought a condo prior to 2000 in the Northern Virginia area, and you had a designated parking spot and they had overflow for like guest parking or what have you. Is it much more likely that that parking spot that you were told you have that was close to your unit is not deeded to the property, or is it likely it is?
It depends on when the unit was built and what they did. Some deeded parking spots and some just assigned.
Okay.
So you want to look for the word assigned versus part of the deed. And that's what the deed, when you bring up a condo deed, it tells you that it's deeded with the property.
Okay. I'll look at mine.
Yeah.
Serious.
So a good example, and I may have told this to the class this time around because, I tell often, David Robertson, about a year or so ago, we had the situation where someone was buying a condo and the owner actually owned 2 parking spots. And the parking spot that was closest to the elevator was the one that they were put on the listing for people to use to access the condo during its listing period. At no time in the listing did it ever indicate that that parking spot nearest the elevator was the parking spot that was deeded to the property. And so a particular person put an offer in and purchased the property, and then to come to find out, instead of having, for example, parking spot 1 right next to the elevator, which was desirable for them because they wanted the proximity to the elevator for physical reasons, they had like parking spot 100, which was much further away. They were very upset, but had that buyer's agent done their due diligence and paid attention to what the legal description said and had filled in their contract correctly, that would have been revealed right up front on the day they wrote the offer. But that's what I'm saying. People tend to just overlook this little group of things here, and they don't think it's all that significant, and it is all that significant, okay? So be very careful.
Wouldn't that be a criteria, real quick before we leave this point, wouldn't that be a criteria to get out of the contract though?
No, why would it?
Deb, did the listing agent put it in the listing that there was a particular parking space?
Just for, you can park in this spot for showing.
You were, okay.
Never claimed anywhere, because in the listing agent had the legal description, the tax record had the legal description, which identified the parking spot number. It clearly stated what the parking spot
Oh,
number.
it did, okay.
That was further away. Okay, got it. So they were super clear about it. Okay, all right. Well, that answers the question. Yep.
Me too, that's what I was getting at. Okay.
Yeah, so that's why it's important. And then the deed, so deed book and the word liber means the same thing. This is just Latin for deed book, or it's liber is Latin for book. Okay, so you're going to look for the deed book number and then the page or folio number. Depends on what county you're working from, whether it's going to have the word page or folio. That's why they're both listed. Okay, some counties still use the Latin term. Okay, and I
Some
may
counties also use instrument number.
Some do, yes. It's less we see, but you do see that. Sometimes you see instrument, tax, and tax map, like 3 different things for the same number because they're merging systems together. And our MLS was merged with a bunch of other MLSs. So that's why those of us from the largest MLS, which is our group here in the Northern Virginia, Maryland, and DC group, we've had a little bit harder time in some of the languages we've been changed over to because other areas have used it for a long time. But be careful and make sure you put those in there. That's identifying that you do have the right property, okay? And then consequently, when a title company gets this, as Samantha knows, on their end, they should be looking at this too and making sure it all matches up. Does this street address match this tax ID?
Mm-hmm. Please put as much information in there that you have, all of it. Don't just be like, the address is enough. Don't do it. Please don't do it. Don't do it.
So I had a rental in Fairfax. I was representing the tenant, and we went to view the property the first time, and it said unit 320. So we get there. It's one of those places that were years ago were apartment complexes, right? So it's been converted to condos. So you walked up and into a unit, and they had 4 units on the ground floor, 4 units on the middle floor, and 4 units on the 3rd floor. So, and then they were named 100, 101, 102, 103, 200, 300. So the first time when I walked in, I'm like, what? And because I was supposed to see unit 28 according to the tax record. I'm sorry. Yes, according to the listing, I was to see unit 28. So that address, number 28. So we walked in and we saw the hundreds. So we looked on the first floor, there was no lock boxes. Went to the second floor, there was no lock boxes. Went to the third floor, we found one lock box. So just as I'm texting the listing agent to find out, the door opens and the tenant, the current tenant says, "Oh, you're the ones here to see the property." And we're like, "Yeah." She says, "Well, come on in." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "But this says unit 20. She goes, "Yeah, I don't know why it says that. Someone else mentioned that too." So the listing agent who had hired, has a transaction coordinator, just like all good transaction coordinators, you cut and paste everything from the legal documents. Well, it was advertised because it says unit 28 on the tax record, okay? The listing agent had not made the connection, and she worked for the property management company, probably had never been to the unit, never made the connection that the listing said unit 28 and the legal description and what she says, the legal description and the listing says unit 28, but on the door itself had unit 302, okay? Because when it was converted from an apartment complex to a condo, the units were renumbered, okay? So they're known to the post office now, okay, as unit 100, 101, 102, 103, all the way up to the third floor. But legally, in the tax record, it was still known as unit 28, okay? And that's where the issues come into bear. So sometimes when you put a listing in like that and there's been a change, that agent could have gone in and changed the unit number to 302, though the tax record is going to still have it as unit 28. So here you would have the address, as unit 302, but the tax record is going to call it unit 28 under the legal description, and that's okay. It's what's known as where they currently live. The legal description is one thing. The address for the postal service is a different thing. So that's where you want to be very careful. Again, the listing agent had no clue that there was a difference. So she had to go back in and correct her online listing and put in some agent remarks to explain to people what was going on. So then the street address. So
Oh, it's
I-
this way, Dave.
That's $675. $700, yeah, $675.
I'm sorry?
Okay, so can you email me and Kimberly Tran and say that
You guys mute.
Now wants to fix it for this price?
Can you guys
and
mute?
wants a-
Can you guys mute? Thank you. Okay, so that street address. Here, I will also put the unit number here, like in the case there, I might put unit 302, but I also put it on this line as well, because not all the documents this auto feeds to, some of the addenda that we pull in does not have a separate line for unit number. So put it here as well. So 1234 Main Street, comma, number 302, comma, Fairfax, comma, Virginia, blah, blah. Well, down here, Fairfax, Virginia. Because some of them put it all in one line and some of them segregated. And it depends on who's mapping these to match up. It's all in computer programming. But what I find and what we found over time is that if we put the unit number solely here, it gets missed on other documents. So make sure it's part of this address line, then also put it here, then the city, and then the zip code, okay? Currently, we're still only requiring the 5-digit zip code. Every now and again, when you're inserting stuff in search engines or whatever, it's gonna demand you put the other 4 digits. So it doesn't matter whether you do the 5 or the 9, but double check your zip codes there, okay? So now we're coming to price and financing. One of the most important paragraphs you have in the contract. This is where a lot of the default windows come from. Let me make sure someone's not trying to get in. Okay. Okay. Someone's not trying to get into. class. I'm sorry. Okay, so price and financing. This is where a lot of the defaults, where the ratification, where your financing contingencies bounce off from. So this has to be accurate. And you as a listing, you as the buyer's agent, you're going to get this information from your buyer's lender. Raekwon, do you mind shutting that door? Thanks. So you're going to get this information from the buyer's lender. And if the lender does not give you the down payment amount or the percentage, call and ask them, you know, because if they're doing, let's say, a conventional that's 20% down, then the beauty is that you put 20% here, okay? Then your financing is 80% if it's a first trust. And is it in a conventional, okay? There's no second trust. There's no seller held trust. So the total financing is here. It's 80%. So, because here's financing. So if you look at this as A, that's one line separate. And you go back to elementary school when you're doing addition. This line here has nothing to do with what's up here. That's a mistake a lot of people make. Paragraph B, okay. All right. So this line here under total financing is the sum of these three items here, okay? So if you're only doing a first trust, it's conventional and it's 80% here, then total financing is 80% here. You've got 20% down, so that equals 100%. It's not 100% financing because you're putting 20% down.
So if it's a VA loan, that would be 100% financing.
So the question is, if it was a VA loan, would it be 100% financing if that's what the buyer wants? Right. Some buyer, because VA does offer that 100% financing. And in fact, if they're rolling in the VA, what's it called, funding fee, then it's really like 101 some percent, but you just put 100%. You don't worry about that 1%. Yes, but a VA loan doesn't always have to be 100%. You know, if the purchaser has cash they want to put down to have a lower monthly payment, they can certainly do that. And in FHA, often you'll see FHA and it's 3.5% here and 96.5% here, okay? And then sometimes there's VH plus and VHA plus, and they might have where they're using a second trust. So again, the lender is supposed to give you this information. You just don't make it up, okay? If the lender your client is working with is not giving you detailed information in the lender letter, you need to call them and make sure you have it correct. The beauty of putting percentages over money, for example, is when you come to your sales price and it gets negotiated. If a property is being sold for $600,000, and let's say it's not a seller's market, it's an even market, and it's been on the market for 30 days, and we offer $590, for example, as opposed to $600. And then so if I were to have money filled in here, let's say here I put down $10,000 down payment, whatever amount of money, $580,000 financing. My total finance is $580,000. I'm offering $590,000. Okay. And then the seller comes back and says, oh, no. We're going to meet you halfway at $595. Okay. Then one of these two numbers have to change or both, which means you have to cross through, change, and all of these areas have to get initialed by everybody. So it becomes a messy, messy page. And you guys could even imagine back in the days of faxing how messy that got, okay? So oftentimes lenders would ask for a clean cover sheet because of the mess. But so the beauty of the percentages is that the only thing that has to be changed and initialed is the sales price, okay? All right, so, and then if there is other types of financing here, there could be a VHDA loan that would go here, okay? Seller held trust, if applicable, means the seller is offering to allow the buyer to use them as the bank. And there's a separate document that gets filled out regarding that. And, you know, and it's a deed of trust. It gets filed like any other deed of trust. It's just the seller is willing to do that. You don't see that too often. My seller down in the country for the land listings, he offered that before he passed away. His heirs are not going to do it, but he did offer if someone wanted to buy the land, he would hold the deed until they paid him off. Okay.
Hey, Deb.
Yes.
Quick question. So if you're working with a client and they haven't firmed up exactly what percentages they want to finance, or if they even haven't found a bank yet that's really ready to take them on, but they do want to make an offer.
No.
Huh?
No.
You can't fill this. You can't.
Yes, no.
Okay.
You
So
know,
don't fill it out.
Shot down.
you do not show a buyer property until they've spoken to an agent. You're protecting yourself that way until they've spoken to a lender.
But
You
what
don't
if they're
know.
very, very close and you know the buyer and they're good from a financial perspective? They just haven't finalized the terms yet. My question was, do you estimate or do you leave this all blank?
You
Or
have
do you not present the offer at all?
It has to be filled in. You do not present the offer until you know for sure. This is a legal contract, and you cannot change the terms of the financing, as you will see below, without getting acknowledgement from the seller. So the reason I say no. So you know someone who financially you believe they're sound and everything's fine, hunky-dory and dandy. They may not know that there's a lien on them that they're totally unaware of, okay? And it could be a false lien. It could be because their name is familiar to someone else's name. It's on their credit report. They have no clue.
Right.
Okay, so whether they choose that lender or not is less significant because they have so many days after ratification to choose the lender, but the terms of the financing cannot change, as we'll see below, without written permission from the seller. So when they get to this point of making an offer, they need to know what their financial terms are going to be. Okay. I mean, they may offer all cash and then turn around and say, oh, money's cheap. My CPA advised me to get a loan. And if they don't tell the seller, and that loan doesn't get finished before they close, they're in default. Okay. And you should never show property to anyone who has not spoken to a lender, no matter how close they are, because the lender, they need to know if they're comfortable with the monthly payment that they're going to, the lender says you'll need for this amount of money, you know. So people go online and they do these quick little calculations sometimes, which does not take into account taxes or insurance, which can significantly change what your monthly payment is. They may go on and put in, like, for a $4,000 loan, they can get something. I'm just making up numbers, people, don't quote me on these. It might save $1,400 a month, but that doesn't take into account the taxes for the area they're living in or the insurance that they have to pay escrows. So that $1,400 a month can become $2,200 a month, for example, and they're not willing to pay that much a month. So that's why you've got to be very careful. This is an agreement. Once it's signed and ratified, they're making these promises. That's why the lender letter accompanies the offer, okay? And so be very, very careful. Good question. And now C, seller subsidy. A couple years ago, Virginia brought this up to the front page. Before that, it used to be part of the financing addendum. So you would have to, as a listing agent, you'd have to look at the front page. You have to go back to the financing addendum to see if they wanted any seller subsidy. Here it's right up front. So it's a percentage or it's a flat fee. Some people just put in 3% because that's roughly what the closing costs are. And some people put in a hard fee here. That is not significant like these up here. You know, where it could change is if the sales price changed. So again, flat fee, and some might just say $1,000 or some might want 10 grand back. You know, it just depends on the market. And and what your client wants, okay? So now financing contingency.
But I have a question. I'm
Sure.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, about the seller subsidy. So let's say the sale price is $600,000 and you ask for $10,000 seller subsidy. Do you reflect this in the sale price at $590, or the sale price stays the same and you just like subtract the seller subsidy of $10,000?
Yeah, you put down what your sales price offer is, that stays the same, and then you put down what you wish your subsidy to be, okay?
Okay.
Now, there is, some people can come into an offer where they're cash poor, so to speak. And now in a seller's market, this isn't going to work as well. In a buyer's market, it may. Where someone's trying to sell their house. I mean, I'm sorry. Yeah, in a buyer's market. I'm sorry, I have that backwards. Sorry.
No, you were right.
Okay, so
When buyers don't have money and they ask, yeah.
Yeah, so in the past, people have bumped up the sales price, believing that it's going to appraise. So it's all based on whether it appraises or not. So let's say instead of paying 600, they're offering 610. But they're asking for 10,000 back in subsidy because they're cash poor. Okay. And so, and then the seller agrees to that. Now, what often happens in that situation, and I've seen this happen in the past, is that the brokerages might have to make a separate agreement to state that the commission is based off 600 and not 610. Okay. Because that takes away from the seller's extra money. So, and that can happen. We don't see that right now, but that, that's something in the future that can be contemplated. Every now and again, you'll see it in some of the outlying markets where they believe that the appraisal will come in at what they're offering, and they're willing to take the risk for that. Okay. All right. So, okay, so this application, so this contract there's an addendum attached based on what we clicked up here on item 1.
I have a weird feeling about
So
that.
is it or is it not contingent on financing?
You think? Well, that's why you bait and
Korea,
switch. Say,
you
okay, I'll
did.
see you there, and then I meet him there.
Karina Brown, could you guys mute, please?
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. I know sometimes we hit our unmutes and forget. So this contract it's got an attached addendum or is not contingent on financing. So right here, you're declaring in paragraph D that it is or is not contingent. Okay. So Jeff, if your clients were just going to take a shot in the dark and they have enough money to buy cash if they wanted to, and they may or may not get financing, then they would say it's not contingent on financing. Okay. But then the listing agent is going to say, well, you need to prove to me that you have enough cash to buy the place, and you have to produce bank records. Okay. That they're going to finance at some point, but that it's not contingent on financing. Oops. Okay. So then the next sentence, if this contract is contingent on financing, so we're reading it sentence for sentence. So if it's contingent on financing, then which is 1 point, buyer will make a written application for the financing and any lender required property insurance, lender financing and insurance no later than 7 days after the date of ratification. 7 days. 7 days. Okay. So when you're working with a buyer, you as an agent working with a buyer, you've not only gone over the buyer's agreement with that buyer, you're also going to share with them the contract, what they're going to be signing when the time comes. It's part of your due diligence with your client. And you're going to make sure they understand paragraph D, that once you're putting this offer together, this stuff needs to be in place. Now they may have been working with, so in the lending world, when you're working with a bank lender to buy a home, you can go out and interview 2 or 3 different lenders, and it doesn't ding your credit score because it's the credit reporting company see that you're shopping for a lender to buy a house. So it doesn't ding your credit score every time you open up and talk to a new lender. So they may have a lender letter from lender A for conventional financing, 20% down. But when it's all said and done, they choose lender C to become their lender later on. Well, that's fine, because your contract's not guaranteeing which lender it is per se, it's guaranteeing the financing. So the financing hasn't changed, they just chose a different lender, but within this 7-day period, they've solidified that. That means they've paid for the appraisal, they've contacted the insurance company, and the insurance has sent all the proper documentation over to the lender and to the title company, and everyone knows that it's proceeding and moving forward. So the moment the appraisal is paid for, the lender contacts the appraiser, and that's scheduled, okay? That's why when you've got, as a listing agent, you're sitting there and no one's contacted you, and they have a contingency for 21 days for appraisal, and you're at day 18. It's like no one's seen the property. What's going on? Okay. So those are things as a listing agent you're aware of, these timelines. Okay. Because they only have 7 days to do that after ratification. 7 straight days. It doesn't say business days. Keep that in mind. Buyers grant permission for cooperating brokerages and the lender to disclose to the listing broker and the seller general information available about the process of the loan application and the loan approval process. So this is something you guys really need to pay attention to and take to heart. This number 2 here, okay? Seller agrees to comply with reasonable lender requirements, okay? So number 2, so in my case, 10 days after ratification on a deal, I was a listing agent. I just got very suspicious because I had not heard from the appraiser, and it was in a market that wasn't busy like here. And so I called the lender and I said, you know, just checking on, I haven't heard from the appraiser. Could you just let me know where everything stands? And, you know, has the appraisal been paid for? And the lender, without thinking, says, well, I told my client she needed to get it paid for. I'm hoping to get it accomplished today. So right there told me, day 10 post-ratification, their client was in default, okay? Now, representing the seller, we could have forced, you know, them to comply, as we'll see later on. But I made the note, sent an email back to the lender, reiterating what they had just told me, reminding them of paragraph D and its significance of the 7 days, and to please follow up with his buyer, okay? Because at this point, their contingency may not protect them, right? Because they did not comply. Where it comes to number 3 here, seller agrees to comply with reasonable lender requirements. So a lender may come back and say that, especially like in VA and FHA, oh, the roof needs to be repaired or replaced. So if a seller is taking a VA loan, and believe me, their listing agent is going to explain to them that the VA is going to be very strict. And if they know that their roof is 25 years old, the VA lender may very well say you have to replace the roof. And in order for the loan to go through, they have to do it. The seller has to do it.
Hi.
Hi.
I just had a comment too. A lot of these lenders are waiting till after the home inspection to order the appraisal, and they're not supposed to do that.
Nope.
It's annoying.
They're not. And their buyers cannot tell them to do that.
Right. So chase them down and tell them to get on with it.
Right. They're breaking this covenant right here. Right. Right. So when I work with a buyer, and when I started out working with my business partner, our first 2 years, almost all of our buyers are brand new. Never first-time home buyers. We're working with VHDA, and my policy was they had to have everything to their lender, everything the lender needed. So the moment the offer was written, the day after the offer was written, they were ready to pay for their appraisal, that the lender had everything they needed. And we were in a busy market then too. And so they were there ready to go. You know, everything was moving quickly. But yes, so you as listing agents, this is what I want you to understand. As this paragraph, by virtue of a buyer signing this contract and it becoming ratified as a contract, their lender has to, because the buyer has given the lender permission for you to call them as a listing agent to find out what the progress is. I had an agent call me a couple of weeks ago and said that the appraisal hasn't been ordered and the lender won't tell her anything. I said, copy paragraph, you know, take page 1 of the contract, which the lender already has. I said, but blow up paragraph D and send it to the lender and say, please read this paragraph and then answer my question. Okay. And just like Karina was saying, that a lot of them are being directed illegally and unethically, and probably by the agent more so than the buyer, not to order the appraisal until the home inspection's done. Well, that's fine if you get the home inspection done in the first 7 days. But by day 7, post-ratification, that appraisal needs to be ordered, okay?
So the appraisal should have been ordered within those 7 days?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. Application for financing, which includes the appraisal being paid for. See, that's where, you know, application for financing includes the appraisal being paid for. Okay. When you're meeting with the buyer, you know, you're talking about their financing and you're not trying to get in their business, but you need to know that they have enough cash or credit on their credit cards that does not significantly hurt them, that they can cover an EMD and they can cover a cost of an appraisal and they can cover a home inspection. So if their EMD is five grand, their appraisal is going to be between 500 and 700. Their home inspection is going to be between 500 and 700. You know, do you have $7,000 to $8,000 cash, right? Or credit available for these purchases? Okay, that's, you know, you're not waiting, oh, well, I don't get paid until, you know, 10 days post ratification to pay for that. That doesn't work, okay? Plus, the lender has to source that money. So they can't pay for that appraisal on someone else's credit card either. The lender's gonna follow that trail and wonder where that's gone to. So all that type of stuff, you gotta be very careful with. And I may have mentioned this when we were talking about buyers, and it's worth mentioning again, we're talking about financing. We would love to say that all lenders are thorough in discussing things with the buyer, and many are. There are some that are not, but always back them up with your own personality with your buyer and really explain to your buyer that they cannot change their financial picture, okay? They cannot go out and get a new credit card of any kind. They can't buy a car. We just had an agent a couple weeks ago getting ready to show a client property, and all of a sudden he calls and says, I can't anymore. I can't afford it. She's like, what happened? Well, I bought a car last week, you know, Labor Day weekend. It's like, I told you not to buy a car. He goes, I really didn't think you really meant it. Why else do we say it?
I've seen this several times working in the title company. Like, people will get the contract ratified, and then between, you know, paperwork and closing, they're like, oh, we bought a car. And the bank's like, sorry, we're out of these.
You've lost, right? I used to use
What
American
happened?
Yeah, I used American Eagle all the time because my daughter shops at American Eagle. And I can remember every time I'd go there when she was little, they say, if you get an American Eagle credit card, you can get these jeans for 50% off. And I'm like, no, thank you. I'll pay for whatever they are. And I would say that. And about a year ago, one of the students in my class came in one day and she goes, my clients almost lost their default on their contract. She goes, you'll never believe it. I'm like, what, American Eagle? She goes, yes. You know, that's what they did. They had gone out and it was a great deal to buy something at American Eagle, and it messed up their financial picture. Now, it was not enough money that they couldn't get paid off and it closed, but they had to work with a lender at American Eagle to do that. You know, American Eagle may have given them like say $1,000 or $5,000 credit, but they had only spent a couple hundred. Okay, but it still shows in their credit portfolio that they have access to that much. So they had to get it paid off and closed out before the lender would let them close. Okay, and I think it did delay settlement a day or two. But those are, you know, things you have to remind your client. I had a client, it was over Memorial Day weekend a couple years ago. He is a nephew married into the family, and we were sitting around and I heard him say across the deck to his dad, I'm going to give my niece my vehicle, and this weekend I'm going to go out and buy a car. We were a week from closing. He thought he had passed that window. I screamed across, I'm like, no, you're not. You can wait till July. You can wait till July's 4th reduction, whatever. And I said, you can ruin everything. And this is someone who was getting first-time home buyer from the VHDA of $7,000, $6,000 seller subsidy, you know, and all this money. He was, you know, he was getting like 13 grand of subsidies. And like, you can wait to buy that car. You know, it's not like you're destitute right now. And so even though we tell them, we have to remind them throughout the process, please remember, don't change anything in your financial picture. And people don't understand enough how credit cards can change that, okay? So use my stories as an example because it helps paint a picture for your clients, okay? How much that can change and how they can then be in default, okay? Same as if someone tries to get themselves fired. Okay, so Virginia's a right to work state. So you can quit without notice. You can be fired without notice. Okay, so someone doesn't want to quit because the employer is going to say they quit and therefore they're in default. But what about they do something to get themselves fired? Okay, would that save them from default? Well, not necessarily, especially if the employer can say they did this and this. That becomes fraud. Okay, so those type of things. So as your client, because once they sign this contract, there are a few ways they get out of it, as we will see as we progress through, but it's not just turn a switch like that, okay? So why don't we take it's 11:16. Let's take a break till 11:20, 4 minutes, okay?
Cool.
Give everybody a chance to get a drink and catch up on your emails and stuff. Yeah. All right, everybody, we're back. Okay. We'll make a anyway, I can't reiterate paragraph D enough. When people call me and they have an issue, I always ask the agent to pull out their offer and let's look at the financing paragraph, because it really a lot of the rest of the contract bounces off what happens there. Okay. So then we have the deposit. Okay, the deposit is what we refer to as the earnest money deposit. So right here, it doesn't say EMD, but that's what it is. Now the deposit and the down payment are not the same amount of money necessarily. It can be. The earnest money deposit here in paragraph 3 becomes part of the down payment, part of the closing cost. It's still the buyer's money. It's just being taken out of the buyer's bank and put it into the escrow bank at a title company, which is what we prefer. And it's sitting there waiting to join up with the rest of their money at closing, okay? So it doesn't have to match. It can, but it doesn't have to, okay? And most of the time it never does. Now, as far as how much a deposit you put down, you know, in our area, people always say, you know, 1 to 3%. Okay, there's no hard and fast rule at all. The more of an EMD you have in a multiple offer situation, with everything else equal when it comes to financing, home inspection, etc., can sway or may sway a seller to choose you over somebody else. So if you had a $25,000 EMD, especially if you're putting $50,000 down, right? If your down payment is $50,000, you're going to put an EMD of $25,000, you know, on an $800,000 house or something. So that's a significant amount of money, because that's your promissory, your skin in the game to the seller to say, I'm saying that everything's in order. I plan on moving forward. Okay, unless your house is a mess and the home inspection tells me so. If you're up against a deal where everything else is the same and the other person only put it down to $5,000 deposit, then the seller may say, well, I would prefer the $25,000. That's more security for me as the seller if something does go wrong in a default situation. Now, the people's financing could be very similar, except the fact that one has more disposable cash than the other at the time of offer, okay? Now, when it comes to making wire transfers and such, you have a limited amount of time to do that in. So part of the conversation that the lender should also be having with the buyer is where is the source of your financing coming from? Are you getting loans from your 401k? Do you have a money market? Do you have CDs? No one talks about CDs anymore, but some people may have CDs they need to cash in, or they're getting a gift letter from a family member. Okay, all that needs to happen in a timely fashion, and it should be cured in the buyer's bank account when if they're using that money, certainly for their EMD. Okay, if they're using it for their deposit, it doesn't need to be in the bank account until you're getting close to closing. But if they're using money sourced from somewhere else for their deposit and paying for the appraisal and the home inspection, etc., then that money needs to be in their account, you know, as you're making this offer or before. Because right here it says buyer's deposit in the amount of, and you put a check mark there, and then you put the amount of money is by check or bank wired funds and or. So let's skip this next section here. Okay, I know this is a little confusing, so we're going to skip that. And it's going to be, because it's, see this little semicolon here? So it's two separate clauses. So the first clause is buyer's deposit in the amount of check or wire bank funds are held by universal title. Okay. Buyer has delivered the deposit to the agent, or buyer will deliver. So unless they've already wired funds to the title company, which is most likely not the case,
Right.
and us as agents are not going to hold on to checks like days of old. We're not going to have our buyer write us an EMD check and hold on to it, you know, in our car, in our purses, in our back pockets, in our wallets. I've seen some of those checks. They're all wrinkled and, you know, we don't really do that anymore. So that's why here you want to put 2 or 3 days, no more than that. Our rule here is 48 or you're late. Okay, so that means within 48 hours of ratification, your client's money needs to be deposited and sent to the escrow company. And if you see down here, it's the 5th business banking day, okay? But we always just say 48 or you're late. It's the pressure that we're putting on you as buyer's agents and the pressure you're going to put on your client to make them understand the significance that their money has to be deposited in so many days.
Coming from a title
If
company,
not,
just
I'm sorry?
so coming from a title company, if you can get your clients to wire it, it makes life so much better.
Well,
It's faster,
exactly, and
more
that's
secure.
right. And that's my point. That's what we're doing nowadays is we're wiring.
Yeah.
So when you present an offer, you're not going to have a copy of a check. You don't have to have a copy of a check. It does not have to be part of, because you're declaring here. Having a picture of a check really means nothing. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of back and forth out there about the security of us sending a copy of our clients' checks, you know, emailing them and all that, because there's information on there. So you're kind of crossing over into some security issues. So long as you let the other side know that they're going to wire the money, there is no check involved. I haven't had checks for 20 years, okay? And I'm not going to go out and get a money order for an EMD. I'm just going to wire it once I'm ratified.
And another thing I'll pop in, just to, you know, forgive me, like wiring is different than transferring. Like PayPal is considered a transfer. Wiring is not an ACH. Wiring cannot be reversed, whereas an ACH transfer can. So that's why they require wires and not ACH transfers.
Correct. I don't know if you guys understood that, the wiring. Yeah, so that's why wiring funds and cashier checks, back in the olden days when you would come to closing, before wiring really was available for the consumer, you would have to go and get a cashier's check to come to closing. They're considered the most secure certified funds. But wiring is not like your ACHs where you can stop payment and reverse them and stuff.
Hey, Deb.
Yes.
Sorry. So before we leave this topic, so you mentioned the 1 to 3% rule in Northern Virginia. So what if someone, what I've heard is be careful about too much of an earnest money deposit because, you know, it could be at risk in certain situations. For example, if let's say the buyer accidentally does things that creates a default, you know, that could be their earnest money deposit could be held in escrow for some undetermined amount of time, or if there's some sort of glitch with the you know, with the parties involved, you know, et cetera, with the processes involved. Can you elaborate on that? It seems to be that there's a little bit of a balance between bigger earnest money to get the property if you think that's necessary versus mitigating your risk by not giving up too much earnest money up front.
Well, when you say a buyer accidentally would be going out and buying a car. Accidentally, you know, that's not really an accident, especially if you've done your due diligence and the lender's done their due diligence to tell the client, the buyer, you know, not to change their financial picture.
Well, known unknowns. I mean, like there's a chance of anything, right? So you want to,
well, if you're following the contract, okay, if you're following the contract and what's contingent, what's not contingent, when we get to the default paragraphs, we'll see what's a default, what's not. Some things are out of but when there's a default that's out of the buyer's hands, for example, COVID. If someone in March was ready to close on March 30th, and all of a sudden mid-March, they're told they don't have a job anymore because of COVID, the company, you know, they worked at Longhorn, for example, and, you know, they made $80,000 a year working at Longhorn. Well, some of those waitresses made good money, right? Yeah.
I'm waitressing wrong. Damn.
And, you know, it depends. Some of them, you know, some of them it's their career. They really do significant. And all of a sudden they've lost their job because of COVID. And it takes a week or two for the governors and everybody to figure out that, oh yeah, we can do carry out food. So even just that few weeks of not knowing, the lender might say, okay, I'm sorry, we cannot go forward. So that wasn't their problem. That wasn't their fault. So they are defaulting on financing on something that was not their fault. So they would get their earnest money back. Okay. And I can see what you're coming from, Jeff. It's skin in the game. It's where someone feels comfortable, and every market's a little bit different. I mean, I've seen $100 EMD on a $200,000 property.
And coming from a title viewpoint again, my job was to like do the money stuff, right? I've never seen, there's one time I've seen escrow money being held for longer than like, as soon as the deal is like null and void or anything happens, that goes right back. I've only seen one time where like a husband or divorcees were fighting over something and it was a year before, but it was because they were fighting. Like it's not because EMD. So I've never seen it being held for longer than any like really a long amount of time. Like it's
the risk is really low.
And as we see going back down into, as we walk our way through the contract, which will probably where we're going to get to that stuff on Thursday, all the default paragraphs and the what ifs, how that comes into play, because there are certain things that a buyer and seller can or cannot do that automatically void and stuff. So we're going to open up that package as we proceed. But good questions, and we'll see how they get answered as we proceed. Okay, so back up here now. So if you're not wiring or doing a check, and most of the title companies just prefer right now that you're wiring to the title company, there's the other option is that you're going to do a note due and payable. So let's say that the buyer has come on the market today and they're going to get money from their money market transferred in, but their bank says, well, we're not sure it'll be here. So today's Tuesday. They say, well, we really can't guarantee it until next Wednesday, okay? So that's more than 5 days away if we ratify, okay, today or tomorrow. So they could do a note due and payable. So there's a note that you get out of your documents that fills out and the buyer and seller agree that they're saying that we're going to pay $10,000 due and payable on, and we'll say like next Friday, you know, October 2nd, as opposed to which takes us away from this down here, what our restrictions are. because they're doing a promissory note for their down payment because the money is sourced from somewhere else. Okay. But there's a note, you know, an agreement made to say that this is what's happening. So it's just, you just don't write it in there. There has to be a note that's attached to it.
I'm correct. When you get EMD from another source, it has to be like where did it come from? Like, you know, some Joe Schmo on the street. Did your mom give you money? Does that have to be recorded here, or like not recorded but noted?
Yes. Well, no, the lender has to know. So the
Oh,
buyer
okay.
is working with the lender, and the lender might say, they would say, my mom is giving me a gift letter of X amount of dollars, which that whole life has changed significantly in the last decade or so, the gift, but they do need to know the source of funds, okay? One of the things you want to make sure of is that your client just doesn't all of a sudden dump a bunch of cash into their bank in the middle of a ratified contract. Because if a lender all of a sudden sees all this cash show up, then they can stop everything. And here's a significant story about that. I was a listing agent, and the buyer was putting down, I think it was like 35% in cash, okay? It was a huge amount for a little condo out in Centerville. And we were supposed to close the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And the Friday before that Wednesday, I got a call from David and the lender that the closing was being postponed because the buyer had gone out to their money market account and had money transferred into their account, $10,000 from their money market account into their bank account, because they were closing on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and he and his fiance wanted to go to Black Friday sales on Friday and buy all the furniture for their new home. Can you keep in mind, they were putting down like 35% on a home that was, what was it, 350,000 or less or something. So they were putting a significant amount of money down. So it wasn't like they were cash poor in their ratios, and it was Navy Federal credit, okay? So all of a sudden, my client, everything comes to a screeching halt. You know, we can't close. And Navy Federal Credit's saying that they will not be able to close them until the Monday after Thanksgiving. So I talked to Highlands Mortgage, and I'm like, okay, if this happened to your client, what would you do? How long would this take to clear up? And they said, oh, probably a couple hours. We could see that it was their own money market. We could see what happened. We're not happy that they did it, but we can source that money pretty easily. Like Samantha was just saying, we can source that it was their own money. But because it was Navy Federal leading into a holiday weekend, Navy Federal was in charge as far as, you know, they're the lender, and they put a blanket statement out that they were not going to close until the Monday following Thanksgiving. So we had to, you know, the other side had to ask us for an extension. Okay. The buyer unknowingly did it. Fortunately, my clients were gracious enough that they didn't have to need the money for a new place. They were moving out of the area and had a time period before their new close. But, you know, things like that can happen. And so that's why you have these conversations, you know, with them. And every bank is different. Where Highlands could have cleared it up by Monday, the week before Thanksgiving, and we could have still closed on Thanksgiving, because in Virginia, or in the United States now, ever since the crash, okay, you have to have 3 days before closing for the closing disclosure. So Navy Federal doesn't work on the weekends, and that was the problem. Okay, they could not get the money, they couldn't get it cleared up and the closing disclosure out within 3 days before closing on that Wednesday, because they don't work on the weekends.
So Deb, sorry, one clarification question. I apologize if I missed it. Is the issue because even though they were putting more money into their credit union account, was the issue because there was a change
Yes.
to that account? Okay, so that's a great confusion point, I guess, for clients. It's like, wow, I'm putting more money into my account. Why would that be a bad thing? Well, the lenders have got to get some stability in a certain time frame for them to say, yeah, it's a go. If there's any instability, even if it's more, you're saying that's a problem.
Right.
Okay.
So I don't know if you guys have who you bank with, like Bank of America, they'll like send out a report and it'll say you normally get this much money in every month, this much you receive this much money. So there's a jump, Well, when you're on commission base, that makes a difference, or when profit share has been really good, there's a jump in my income. Or if I decide to, buy a car for cash, I spent more money this month than I normally do. So that's what a lender looks at too. This amount of money generally comes in on an average on a month because they're asking for 2 months worth of your statements. They see what you started out with, and this is the average of what happens. This is the amount of money you collect based on your paychecks or whatever. And then all of a sudden 10 grand shows up in your account, which, that's a red flag, especially if it's cash, right? That alerts the feds. So people that are doing illegal stuff, they don't put 10 grand in their account in cash. But so those type of things are where, your conversation with your buyers, and they have to work with their lender. So had that buyer known that, they could have gone to the lender and say, hey, I want to move money from a money market account over so that I can do Black Friday sales and pay cash for it, basically. The lender would have known prior to them doing that, and it would not have been a big deal. Navy Federal could have seen that the money was sourced from their own money market account, okay? They could have looked at their financial picture and known it. So I always share with buyers when someone's trying to get a property or they're starting out, they don't have a lot of cash flow, and they'll say, well, my mom or my cousin or somebody's going to give me some money or whatever. Say, well, the banks go back 60 days. So if you have money in your account from 90 days before that, the bank doesn't know where it came from, type thing, So they're really looking at your last two bank statements, which could be slightly more than 60 days back from where you started. So, so that's what they're looking at. They're looking at what normally happens in your account. So it's the big changes that make a difference, okay? Or all of a sudden same thing, had a big payment gone out they couldn't account for, they would wonder what happened, okay? It wouldn't have been as significant as the deposit though. All right, so so then back up to here. So we've sent it to the title company. So if the escrow agent is a Virginia real estate licensee, which is a real estate office or broker, the parties direct escrow agent to place deposit in an escrow account by the end of the 5th business banking day following receipt of the following date of ratification. Sunday is not a business banking date because the banks are closed, right? And a holiday, but Saturdays are a business banking date. With that said, we still say 48 or you're late, okay? It's just to keep you guys on track. If escrow agent is not a VREB licensee, a realtor firm, real estate firm, deposit will be placed in an escrow account of escrow agent date after ratification in conformance with the laws and regulations of Virginia, and or if VA financing applies as required by Title 38 of the U.S. Code. This account may be interest bearing and all parties waive any claim to any interest from deposit. The deposit will be held in escrow until, 1, it's going to be credited to the sales price at settlement. So it's being held in someone else's bank, and then it's going to go in with all your money at settlement. 2, all parties have all parties have agreed in writing as to its disposition. We'll get to that in a minute. A court of competent jurisdiction orders disbursement and all appeal periods have expired. Or 4, disposed of in any other manner authorized by law. Seller and buyer agree that escrow agent will have no liability to any party on account of disbursements of deposit or on account of failure to disperse deposit, except in the event that the escrow agent's gross negligence or willful misconduct. So let's break this down. Number 1 is pretty straightforward. The money is being held, you go to close, it becomes part of your package, okay? 2, the buyer has voided on home inspection the buyer has been voided on condo or HOA, then all parties just sign the notice to void. Well, the notice to void is a one-way lateral that the buyer sends, but both parties sign the release of deposit. Okay. If the seller does not sign the release of deposit, and we'll find out down below the significance of that, but when there is a contingency that has a voidable clause, the seller cannot refuse to void if it's a legitimate voidance, okay? And that'll be, we'll discuss that later, okay? And then if the seller does fight it and it goes to court, then that's where 3 comes into play and 4, okay? But then if the escrow agent does not represent either party, they represent the contract. It's kind of what we say, they represent the flow of the paperwork. And that money is protected by the escrow agent's deposit. And the escrow agent cannot say, oh, I like Raekwon. I know you didn't do anything wrong, Raekwon, as the buyer. I'm going to give you your deposit back. And me as a seller gets shafted when Raekwon really may have done something to default and I'm refusing to let him out of the deal. So, so an escrow agent cannot make that decision. They can only release the money because it's marrying up with the money at closing, or they have a release that both parties have signed, buyer and seller, not the agents. Or the court has said, now David Robertson of Universal Title, you need to release this money to so-and-so, okay? And we'll go into more detail when we look at those disclosures later this week and next week. Okay, settlement, okay? Seller and buyer will make full settlement in accordance with the terms of this contract. That is settlement on or within mutual consent before. On or with mutual consent before. It used to say on or before, and then we had to put in the word mutual consent because the buyer may be ready to close before the seller because their financing got done, but if the seller's not ready to move out, they don't necessarily have to agree. And where this really comes into play is every state's different. We have 50 states plus our territories. And then you got people in other countries who bought and sold in other countries. So the way real estate works in each state is very different. In Virginia, Maryland, and DC, when we put a settlement date in here, it's considered a hard, fast date unless agreed one way or the other to move it off the bar, okay? In other areas, it's a projected date. So buyers and sellers both, whoever you're working with, they need to understand that that's the date we're all shooting for. That's the date we're held accountable for, unless we agree upon otherwise, okay? I had a seller years ago who unfortunately had also been an agent like a decade before. And for whatever reason, I don't know, I did not know her when she was an agent. But for some reason, she thought it was a suggested date. And the buyers went by her house the day before closing and said, nothing's been moved. Or 2 days before closing, nothing's been moved. Everything's still in the house. When are the movers coming, So I called her up and she goes, oh, well, I thought maybe, on the weekend. I'm like, I know. We were closing on Wednesday, you need to be out. You need to get people moving now. And I had that conversation with her before, but it was one of those things that she just, one of those personalities. So those are things that we have to, keep in mind of. And that was a lesson for me when I'm teaching to share that with you guys, but also when I'm working with sellers to paint that picture for them. This is, you take a calendar and you say, okay, this is our settlement date. When are you planning on moving out? What's your plan for, between ratification and settlement, and that way, you as an agent can communicate with the other side as well, because you'll see when we get to the home inspection paragraph, the buyer has 7 days from the day of settlement to do their inspections. So that makes the significance as to when the seller's leaving. So, as you as a listing agent want to know what's going on with your seller, what their plan is. So the settlement date, unless mutually agreed upon, is, let's say, October 31st. And I say October 31st because I'm saying, oh, that's the end of the month, let me do it. Never, ever, 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 ever write it down until you look at it. And what is October 31st? It's a Saturday. Okay? So just bear that in mind. So I put in here October 31st. So settlement, except as otherwise provided in this contract, if settlement date falls on a Saturday, a Sunday, or a legal holiday, the settlement will be the prior business day. And this is a huge mistake that most agents make. They always think it's going to come the day after because they don't read this paragraph. They just assume it would be the 30th, okay? And that's what it says. So if the buyer put in here the 31st, I'm as a listing agent, I'm going to double check that that is an actual closing date. I always do. But if I didn't, and the title company called, the title company would say, hey, by the way, everybody, the 31st is a Saturday. We don't close on a Saturday. That means your closing date's on the 30th. Now, of course, everyone can change it and make it November 2nd.
Right.
They choose to by mutual agreement. But as this paragraph stands, it's automatically October 30th, okay? All right, now in bold letters, notice to buyer regarding the Real Estate Settlement Agents Act. Choice of settlement company. You have the right to select a settlement company to handle the closing of this transaction. The settlement agent's role in closing your transaction involves the coordination of numerous administrative and clerical functions relating to the collection of documents and the collection of disbursement of funds required to carry out the terms of the contract between the parties. If part of the purchase price is financed, your lender will instruct the settlement agent as to signing and recording of loan documents and the disbursement of loan proceeds. No settlement agent can provide legal advice to any party in the transaction except for settlement agent. I think I got a few more. It's 11:50, okay. Except for settlement agent who is engaged in the private practice of law in Virginia and who has been retained or engaged by a party to the transaction for the purpose of providing legal services to that party. I think I skipped a sentence. Your lender will give instructions to the settlement agent as to the signing and recording of loan documents and the disbursement of loan proceeds. No settlement agent can give legal advice to any party to the transaction except a settlement agent who is engaged in the private practice of law, right? And who has been retained or engaged by a party to the transaction for the purpose of providing legal services to that party. So you might have an attorney who, like David and them are not separate attorneys. They are simply title company. But you do have attorneys who also do title work and they may represent a buyer or seller. They're being retained to do the closing, but they're also being retained under a separate hat as their attorney to give them advice. Okay, it's a variation by agreement. The provisions of the Real Estate Settlement Agent Act may not be varied by agreement, and rights conferred by this chapter may not be waived. The seller may not require the use of any particular settlement agent as a condition of the sale of the property. Escrow closing and settlement service guidelines. The Virginia State Bar issues guidelines to help settlement agents avoid and prevent the unauthorized practice of law in connection with furnishing escrow, settlement, or closing services. As a party to a real estate transaction, you are entitled to receive a copy of the guidelines from the settlement agent upon request in accordance with the provisions of the Real Estate Settlement Agents Act. So you look on a listing and it says XYZ brokerage prefers, or they'll say the seller prefers that we use ABC Settlement Agency, okay? Or the seller strongly prefers that you use ABC Settlement Agent, okay? And it's a multiple offer situation. And you think, well, if I put ABC Settlement Agent in there, I might have a better chance to win this deal for my buyers. Great, put it in there. Because this paragraph protects your buyers above all else. So you are the one that gets ratified. Your contract is ratified. It's a done deal. The very next document you send the listing agent that your buyers have signed is a notice of sales contract stating simply that the buyer has chosen Universal Title to represent them in this closing. It's not unethical. It's not illegal. There's nothing wrong with that. Because first of all, most realtors should know that they should never put that language in there, okay? And we see it less and less now. Then you've got the new construction. who, if you use their title company, you get so much in discounts. If you use their lender, you get so much in discounts. This last year, I've done 2 deals with new home construction. And both cases, I wish it's not, and my clients all both agreed, one really significantly agreed, that it was not worth the money they saved from that title company for the headaches they dealt with that title company. So it was someone who had bought and sold several homes, and the lack of services they got from that title company, because in fact, that title company is part of Toll Brothers. So that title company was truly representing Toll Brothers, you know, and so trying to get a straight answer as to any simple thing as to what was happening with their deal was horrendous. They said to me, you should counsel your clients on buying new construction to go with a separate lender and a separate title company. Okay. And yes, we were in the middle of COVID when this started playing out. It started before COVID, but because of COVID, we ended up not being able to close for a couple months. But most of the issues was with the title company themselves. Okay. So with that said, we're going to stop here on this paragraph. And does anyone have any quick questions before we close out?
Negatory.
So everything's clear as mud?
Yep. I would say find a title company that you like and stick with them, or recommend to your clients that you stick with them, because once you find one, you're like, I got to roll.